two writers, one just starting out, the other a bestseller. Join James Blatch and Mark Dawson and their amazing guests as they discuss how you can make a living telling stories. There's never been a better time to be a writer.
Hello and welcome to the Self-Publishing Formula Podcast. It's a Friday and here we are, James and Mark. And so many people, Mark, told us they do listen to us as soon as it's released on a Friday. So that's good because Friday is a good day, isn't it?
It is, and I like doing this on a Friday because it gives people something to listen to over the weekend as well. So there's obviously a few others in our space who go out on Mondays, Joe Penn, SPP on Wednesday, Silver Book Show on Wednesday, and so it gives us a Friday, something for people to look forward to as they get into the weekend. Something
for the weekend. We should have called the podcast that. There you go. An old English barbershop expression that some people may know. And it's been a very busy time for us because it's one of our periodic course launches. Ads for Authors, the big, we call it an advanced course. I guess it's the course that gets into the nitty gritty of transforming your author career into something that finds readers and sells books. And one of the things we did this week, we add material to this course all the time. And we added the BookBubs for Authors course to Advertising for Authors. And we had, of course, Adam Croft on a couple of weeks back. And that's gone down really well, particularly with people who bought the course a couple of years ago and are constantly surprised that they get all this stuff for free. But once you're in, you're in. And the feedback, credit to Adam, the feedback has been absolutely fantastic on BookBub ads.
Yeah, it's nice. We had a couple of posts in the Mastery group, which is the Facebook group that's for writers who are in the Ads for Authors course, and very complimentary. I mean, I think it's an excellent module. Adam is a good teacher. He's got a lot of interesting ideas on how to use BookBub ads, and it's lovely to see people, first of all, grateful that they're still getting stuff after maybe they've been with us for a couple of years, and also that they enjoy the content and they can see how potentially valuable it could be to them. So we're really chuffed with how that's gone down.
Yes, it's been a busy time running up to this, but we sweat a lot about what we put out there and how good it's got to be, and crucially for us, it's got to be something that has to be able to have an impact, a valuable impact on authors' careers. That's our acid test of this, and that's why actually we scrapped stuff as well. So Twitter was there while it was working, and it was for a while, and people were going great guns on it. And we have very recently scrapped the course because Twitter has frankly stopped working for authors, and so we've taken that away, but plenty of stuff has replaced it. And that's the dynamic environment in which we live in, right, Mark?
It is, yeah. You and me anyway. I'm not sure I'd ever call John dynamic, but that's.
He occasionally moves quickly. If you produce a tray of donuts, there's a real fluidity to the way that he scampers across the room. Poor old John.
That's our contracted John Dyer dig out of the way for the episode.
And we'll get a couple of complaints of bullying in the workplace.
Yes,
which is probably justified. Okay, look, we have 2 author interviews for you in a row in the next couple of weeks, and the first one is a much requested YA author, so I'm going to come on to her in a second, but just before we hear from our author today, I just wanted to tell you that if you are interested in the course, we have released the sales page, the link to get there and read all about it, which is selfpublishingformula.com/ads17, ADS17. So if you're interested in ads for authors, you want to learn more, there's a load of information on that page. And of course, final plug for the course, we do have a 30-day money-back guarantee, and Mark and I are more than happy for you to have a look around. You get full access to the courses, all the courses, straight away. If it's not for you, drop us an email and we'll refund you within 30 days. 30 days, by the way, runs exactly as it sounds, 30 days to the second. So if you buy it on 7 p.m. on June the 2nd, it'll be 7 p.m. on July the 1st. Does that make sense? Because we always get people, I don't know why, people leave it to the last day, and then as it turns out, they've got the wrong last day, and then we end up, it's quite complicated at that point because there's no easy mechanism to do it. So that's the word from somebody who's on the receiving end of having to do this stuff.
Yes, exactly. Yeah, no, we're pretty open and flexible as far as we can, but no, it's a 30-day guarantee. There's plenty of time for people to have a good look at everything and decide if that's for them or not. We're quite happy for people to do that.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, so yes, we had from time to time people email and say what they'd like to hear on the podcast. We're always grateful to hear that. So you can always email us at support@selfpublishingformula.com. And we had a few requests for a YA author. So whilst I was in the States recently, I sat down with a couple of authors, and we've got a couple of interviews coming up in a row about this. It's not just about that YA genre, it's also about their particular approach to writing and marketing and how they've got to where they're going. And both these authors have been very successful. And they've done it quite quickly, and they've done it through a real focus on the type of advertising that Mark talks about and we talk about on the podcast all the time. So to hear the nitty gritty from it, I hope it's going to be both inspiring and valuable, which is the two things we aim for. And Michelle, we met Michelle probably 12 months ago or so, I think, for the first time. She came down to St. Pete Beach for NINC last year to say hello to us. She was to listen to the podcast, and had come from a traditional publishing background and didn't really know where to. In fact, she did start quite poorly, and she explains this in the interview. She sort of went into self-publishing and did what probably thousands and thousands upon thousands of authors do, which is to upload their books to Amazon, fold their arms across their chest and wait for the money to come in. And it doesn't quite work like that, does it?
What?
It might do for you.
What are you saying? No, it doesn't. It doesn't happen like that. You've got to get out there and do some marketing and some promotion. And Michelle has jumped in. She's obviously got an aptitude for both the writing and the marketing, and she's used some of the things that she learned in the ads course to really propel herself up the charts. I think yesterday she had a book that was 200 or 300 in the US store. So obviously doing really well, making a good living for herself.
Yeah, and she's a great traveller, Michelle. I think she was just about to get onto a cruise ship and go around Norway and parts of Europe when we met her in Florida. She's back as we speak now. But this was an interview recorded a couple of weeks back, and I hope you enjoy it. Michelle Madow.
Yes.
You've just taught me how to say your name.
Yes.
I know, but that's the sort of thing I like to learn. Welcome to the SPF podcast.
Thank you. I'm so happy to be here.
Well, it's great to have you here, and not least because there's been requests for YA authors, and your name comes up quite a lot. You're quite high profile in the community. I know you post quite a lot in the books, in the groups. And you've been an alumni of Mark's courses, and you are very successful, traditionally published. So we're going to go through quite a few things. And in particular, for people who are also writing YA, I know that they're going to want to hear stuff about how you devise stories, how you market, what's working for you, etc. So we've got lots to cover.
Great.
Hey, you're excited.
I love all this stuff, so I'm so excited.
Good. I know you're going to be great. So thank you for coming on. So let's start. Why don't you give us the skinny on who Michelle is?
Yeah, so I write young adult fiction. I wrote my first book when I was a junior in college. And the summer between my junior and senior years, I got my first agents. And I tried the traditional routes, and I actually did succeed in that. But after being traditionally published, I wanted to take more control over my writings and my career. So that's why I got into indie writing. And I just have been writing a lot more YA fantasy since starting my indie career in the beginning of 2016. So.
And that's interesting, because a lot of people will get to that point of being traditionally published and won't necessarily start looking around to, as you say, take control. What was it that prompted you to want to take? What did you mean by take control?
Well, I actually had another friend who had just started indie publishing around the time that the third book in the traditional trilogy had released. And, while it was great to see my books on the shelves, I wasn't really happy with how it was going financially, because traditional houses don't really pay most of the authors what I kind of would want to earn as an author. It was much less than I would ever want for a trilogy. And so I saw this one friend who was suddenly raking in money from indie publishing, and I was like, well, I could do that too. And then I could have more control over my career, and I could release books faster. I could release the books that I want to release, because while I enjoyed writing, backtrack a bit, the series that was as traditionally published was actually a contemporary young adult series called The Secret Diamond Sisters. And while I loved that, my heart has always been in writing fantasy. That's just my favorite genre to read. It's my favorite genre to write. But when I was trying to be traditionally published, they were not looking for any fantasy. They wanted something different. So I wrote something else for them, but I wanted to have my career be writing what I want to write. And that is fantasy that I also think readers want to read. So that's very important to me. And I wanted to release books on my own schedule. I wanted to not be held back by a publisher's schedule. I wanted to take control of my marketing on my own because I didn't feel like the big publisher house really was doing a lot for me in that area.
That makes perfect sense on both counts. And we're hearing it quite a lot. I mean, there's two areas I think traditional publishing are going to have to deal with at some point. And one is paying authors more.
Yes.
You create the content, you create the product, and 6% or whatever, I don't know what you were on before, but it's does not seem like a fair reward.
Yeah, I mean, people ask me all the time why I switched from traditional to indie, and all I have to tell them is that with my traditional series, I was getting 9% royalty, with 15% of that going to my agents. With indie publishing, I'm getting 70% royalty, and I get to keep that 70%. And then they're like, oh, okay, that makes sense then.
Even my basic maths. And the other half of it is people wanting to write what they intuitively know your readers want, and then being told by, I don't know whether it came from the publisher or your agent or whatever, somebody sitting in New York or somewhere, that's not the direction we want you to go in. And that seems like a really odd way of dealing with an author as well.
Yes. I think that readers love vampires. I think they love any supernatural creatures. Just supernatural adventures, like, it's a huge thing that readers enjoy and love. As a reader, that's what I enjoy and love. But I'm not seeing a lot of it in traditional anymore. So, I wanted to write what I love.
Yeah, and some of those areas that I think the traditional industry has probably been a bit snobbish about over the years, like romance is another area, they have blossomed under the indie world. It's really shown people that when those romance authors were writing letters to publishing houses saying, I think people really want to read this, and they're saying, we're not doing tacky romance, they were right. The authors were right, because they are selling in big numbers. So there you go, there's liberating. Well, that's our trad versus indie segment for the podcast for this week. And just remind me when this was. When was this transition for you? And how did you get out of your trad contract? Did you have to buy yourself out? Did they come to an end?
So I did not get out of the contract. I was only contracted for a trilogy. So that contract I made in December 2012. Book 1 did not come out until February 2014. So that shows a little bit of how long you have to wait. And then I had book 2 come out that fall, and book 3 came out in the fall of 2015.
Wow.
And it was actually, that contract was completed. And then I branched out with my Elemental series. I decided to really look at indie publishing as a business, and I started that in the beginning of 2016. I basically was starting from nothing with my business, because as I mentioned before, traditional paid me practically nothing. So I started from zero with Elementals in January 2016, and I have built that up now to a 6-figure business in 1 year, mainly from the courses that I took.
Well, that's fantastic, but also from the writing you're doing, which is, so congratulations on that.
Thank
you. That's brilliant, Michelle. We're going to talk about the business side in a second. Let's talk
sorry.
No, that's absolutely fine. Let's talk about the writing a bit. So Elementals, what's the basis for the series?
So Elementals is about a girl who moves to a new town, and she finds out that she is a witch descended from Greek gods, and her and 4 others start developing elemental powers, and they learn that it's up to the 5 of them to save the world from the Titans, who are coming back from an alternate reality to come and take over the Earth.
Cool. Sounds really cool. And that's the sort of thing that you've been reading as well? That type of genre?
That's what I love. And I actually wrote the first book of that when I was a senior in college. And my agent had tried to pitch it to traditional publishers, and they just wanted nothing to do with it. So it had been sitting around as book 1, and I was like, I have this book, so I'm going to indie publish it and write the rest of that series. So that's what I did. And
you haven't really looked back. You say it's happened quite quickly for you then, because we're only in autumn 2017 now, so not even 2 years.
Well, one thing I learned from looking at the indie market was that writing fast is really important, because readers want to keep reading a series. They don't want to wait like 1 year between a series. They want the next book to be available to them. And I feel like I have control to make that happen as an indie author, because I don't need to keep waiting for the publisher to get back to me. When I was trad published, I would, give them my final book, and then it would be maybe 6 months before they gave me my edits back. So that was a huge amount of time that, the book could have been out.
Frustrating.
Yeah, it was very frustrating.
Yeah.
So
how many books have you got now?
I just finished writing my 16th book.
Oh, in Elemental series?
Oh, not in Elementals.
No, okay,
total.
Yeah.
Elementals is 5 books. It finishes at 5.
You've done well, 16.
I recently started a new series called Vampire Wish, which is kind of a mix of Twilight and Aladdin, with a little bit of it's a huge supernatural world with all different kinds of supernatural creatures. And I'm having so much fun. I just finished the 4th book. It just came out. 5th book's coming out in December. And I'm going to be expanding upon that world to focusing on different creatures like angels and fairies and demons and stuff.
Cool. Who are your readers?
So I think my readers are mainly Kindle Unlimited subscribers. That's a huge chunk of my market. I know with fantasy, especially YA fantasy, like KU is huge. It's not the same for every market. So I always like say when people ask me about KU, do test it for your market first. But that's a huge chunk of my market. And I've realized that even though I write YA, people think I'm only writing for teens, which is completely not true. And that's a huge mindset that I had to change going into it marketing, is that YA readers are not necessarily teens. People who read YA are mostly adults. So I had to go from the mindset of trying to market to teenagers by going to schools to marketing to adults online.
And you learned that through what we're going to come on to now is the way that you run your business and the advertising and so on.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay, great. Well, let's move on to that then. So you started from this standing start in 2016.
Yes.
Where did you start?
So I started and I had just released Elementals 1. It was January 26, 2016.
And tell me about that process then. So that's cover, editing and so on. Where did you get all this?
Right. So that book had actually been edited by my agent that I had had previously, because we had tried to send that into publishers. So that book had been looked at by a gazillion different people. It was pretty much ready to go. I got a cover recommendation from someone that I knew. They recommended me to a graphic designer who designed that cover. And I just kind of put it up on Amazon and hoped that it would sell. I got some bloggers to read it.
You did the formatting yourself?
I did, yeah. So now I actually use Vellum for formatting, but back then what I did was I downloaded the free Smashwords guide.
Okay.
And I formatted it myself in Word.
Wow.
I just followed all the instructions in that guide and to get a clean Word document.
Okay, so you fished around using Google was your friend, right?
Yeah, so I put up Elementals and kind of crossed my fingers and hoped it would sell, and I did a blog tour and nothing that I was doing was working. I was like...
So you did a blog tour. How did you organize that?
I did. I went to a blog tour organizer and kind of had interviews posted on different blogs, because that really was effective back in 2011. But this all I was doing in 2016, and times had changed a lot, and I hadn't realized that I had been in the trad world from 2012 to 2016. So I just didn't know. So I was doing the trad way of doing things. And I was just refreshing my Amazon page and seeing my rank just getting worse and worse and worse, and getting really disheartened because, I had a friend who had put their book up and it just started to do amazing out of nowhere. And I was like, why can't that just happen to me? So then I was like, I can't just sit here and cross my fingers and pray. I need to take action. So I started Google searching, how can I sell more books? How can I market my book better? And just random stuff like that. And one day I was just scrolling through Facebook and I saw a Mark Dawson ad saying, here's how you sell more books, learn about lead generation ads on Facebook. So I signed up for the free 3-video lead generation ad offer that he has. And I learned how to do the lead gen ads. And they did really well for me. I started to see people consistently coming into my newsletter. And from there, I knew I just had to sign up for the course when it came out in May so I could grow my business even further.
Okay, so I don't want this to become too much of an advert for the course, but obviously that absolutely
that's
absolutely fine. It's true,
Yeah.
So Mark helped you find the power of Facebook advertising and social media advertising,
Yes.
And that was presumably the beginning of where we are now to the 6-figure turnover income.
It was what made all the difference. I learned that I needed to really focus on getting a box set out. So in 2016. I was learning about marketing and advertising, but I was also focusing on learning how to write faster. So I outline all my books before I write them. I'll have very detailed outlines. My outlines are probably about 5,000 words, and they're scene by scene. And if I sometimes hear what character is going to say in those scenes, and I'll write those down in my outline so I don't forget them. And I deal with any plot issues in my outline. It makes my process go so much faster because that way when I'm done drafting and I'm editing, I don't have any major plot issues to fix because I've fixed them all in the outline stage. So that was huge in just increasing my productivity, where I could get that draft out and I will just sit down every day and make sure that I get 1,000 to 2,000 words written. I know there are some authors who try to write 5,000 to 10,000 words a day, and that works really well for them, which is awesome. But for me, that's kind of intimidating. So I try to look at it as 1,000 to 2,000 every day. And by doing that, I can release a book every month or 2 months, which I think is a great pace. Well, at least it is for me. Yeah. So I got my box set out in December, exactly on Christmas 2016. And from there, I started advertising that, and everything really took off for me in January 2017.
Great. It's funny you should say that, because we're at the end of this. We're actually flying back to London tonight from here. So we've been here for a couple of weeks, talked to lots of authors, talked to Johnny and Sean from the Self-Publishing Podcast and Sterling and Stone and so on. And in the back of my mind and all these interviews, I haven't bored them to death with my own story, but I'm thinking I'm really struggling with the rewrite of my first book and doing stuff. So funny enough, last night, having had a few conversations in the last week, I started a detailed 5,000 to 6,000 word outline. Yes. And I think I'm really feeling quite energized now that I think what's missing when I sat down to write was not really knowing where I was going. And it, as you say, for some people, that's the only way they can write. I think Lee Child writes like that, doesn't he? He famously sort of sits down and knocks out his book. I thought it was going to work for me. You perhaps thought it's just not for everyone.
Yeah, I've always outlined, but there was one book where I sat down and I was like, I'm going to try not to outline because I don't want to judge something without trying it. So I sat down and I tried to write a book with no outline, and I just got so overwhelmed by not knowing where my book was going that I wasn't moving forward with it.
I know that.
And it just wasn't working for me. So I know that I need my outline because I like to get all my plot down and have the plotting done. That way, when I'm drafting, all I need to think about is getting my words down. I don't need to worry about plot issues or anything else because that's already taken care of.
You're writing the scenes, and you know what's going to happen at the beginning, middle, end of the scene. And you can write in. It's
like transcribing the movie in your mind that you've already written like the outline for.
Yeah. So you did Mark's course and picked up what you could from other people, and you started to advertise on social media. So talk to us. I'd be interested in a little bit of the detail of that. So you were using lead gen ads, and how was your targeting? How are you setting up your targeting?
Yes. So I started with $5 a day in lead generation ads, and I targeted other authors in my genre. So I believe that I still have this one running actually. So I started one, it was March 2016 that I'm still using because it gets me about 30 cents a lead consistently. And I'm like, great, that can just run in the background. So I think I target A Shade of Vampire, which is a very popular fantasy YA series, Jennifer Armentrout, and Amanda Hawking, because I know that she was indie before going traditional. So I thought that indie readers would probably have liked her page or whatever. And that has just worked really well for me. I did a lot of testing, of course, of a lot of things that didn't work. And this one just happened to work. It was a lot of playing around with the ads, for sure, playing around with images and my ad text that I was using, and then comparing them and seeing which one was performing better, and then stopping the ones that weren't working until I came up with this one golden ad. This
does sound very Dawsonian approach to life. The wording, so what in the end was working for you in terms of what were the key phrases?
So the key phrase is, in all capitals, I say limited time offer. That's huge. It's just the first thing that you see, limited time offer.
And isn't that funny that this is something Mark says and other people in the industry say, is that we're not reinventing the fundamentals here. We're doing old-fashioned advertising. It's all been around for hundreds of years in a different way. So limited time offer is a phrase that's worked in newspapers, in magazines, on billboards for decades, if not centuries. And there you go. Who knew that?
Because people don't want to miss out on something that's limited time. They want to get it now.
Yeah. We always like the podcast to add value. And I think a lot of people will be scribbling that down now, thinking, adjusting my ad now. So those started working, started building up your mailing list. And limited time offer presumably was a sale advert.
So it was actually, at first I give away different books depending on where I am in my career. So everything is technically a limited time, because at first I was giving away Transcend Time 1. This was before I was even in KU, so I could give that away. But then I entered KU, so I could not give away anything in KU. So I had this elemental short story.
Did you write that specifically for this?
Actually, no, I had written it in 2011 when my agent at the time told me I should write a short story. I don't know why she told me to do that. I really have no idea.
Turned out to be good advice.
But I had it. I had it. So I had the short story. So I call it a bonus elemental story. And so I'm giving that away now. My next thing I'm going to be working on is a prequel novella for Before My Vampire Wish series, because that's going to be my new long series. And that's going to be what I'm going to give away. So yes, when I start giving away my vampire prequel novella, the short story won't be that offer anymore. So it is limited time.
So before you did sort of came across Mark and others at that time, did you have a list? Did you know what a list was at that point?
Yeah, so I did have a list, but I was getting people to sign up by saying sign up to get, new updates. and stuff like that. It would just be in the back of my book. If you want to hear updates from Michelle Madow, like sign up here. I wasn't really getting a lot of signups. I was doing a few giveaways and then importing those people into my lists, but I didn't have a sequence for them to warm them up. So they just started getting random emails from me, and that didn't really work. So I had a list, but it was small just because I didn't have an offer. The free offer is the best way to get people on your list.
And then, as you say, you mentioned it briefly then, but a sequence of emails that are set there, automated, yes, that basically onboard people onto your list, and so they become. And I think there's important part of those sequences which people underestimate is also gets rid of people who are just in the wrong place.
Yes.
You don't want your list being bloated with people who aren't ultimately going to buy your books, but it's the right phrasing. So you do that now.
I have a bunch of sequences. I use Convertkit for my list just because I feel like if you're doing more intermediate or advanced marketing, it really is great because I can get subscribers and put them into the list that's right for them based on how they got onto my mailing list. And I can analyze how people are getting onto my mailing list so I can put more of my marketing money toward those things that are working the best. So I have a variety of email sequences, like one of them for people who came in through a giveaway import because they need a little more warming up than other people. I have a sequence for people who got my elemental short story. I'm going to start one for people who get my vampire novella that I'm going to write soon. And I just have one for people who people do still sign up because they want updates, but very few people. So they have one too.
Kind of newsletter.
Even though I got like one or two a day of those, but they still have a list.
Yeah. Well, we bumped into Alexis from Convertkit in New York at the beginning of this trip, and had a good chat with her, and she's very keen to work with SPF, and we're going to come up with an offer, I think, for people. I use Convertkit.
It's wonderful.
It's great. Yeah, we use Infusionsoft for our big business for SPF. I use Convertkit for my author business, and I'm at the point now where I would be saying to people, I know MailChimp's free, and if you really are starting very small, but actually porting lists is quite difficult. Convertkit, if you can get in early with it, it does everything you're going to need it to do up to the advanced stage. Yeah,
so once I joined Convertkit, actually, I started seeing my email list explode. Like, it was doing. I was in MailChimp at first, like most people are.
Of course.
Yeah.
The monkey.
And I mean, it was great. It was still growing when I was using all the techniques, but once I was able to use Convertkit and see where more people were coming from is when I was able to just grow my email list by thousands.
Yeah. So you've really taken to this side of things. And was there something in the background for you before this period of your life where you were tech savvy, or you quite liked social media? Or?
So funnily enough, when I was in high school, I was very into MySpace. And I used to...
I remember MySpace.
Yes, MySpace. Yes. I used to design MySpace layouts for fun. I had a MySpace page called Mish Layouts, where I would design MySpace layouts that were themed off of Twilight, it still is like my all-time favorite book series. And claim to fame here, Stephanie Meyer used one of my coded layouts for her MySpace back in 2006.
Shut the front door, as they say.
Yes, it was huge.
That's amazing.
I was
that's still going to be a major point in your life.
I was 19 years old and I was just starting doing this coding thing for fun, and it's like, whoa, Stephanie Meyer's using a layout I coded.
Wow. So there was something there in terms of design and getting online and doing stuff.
Yeah, I mean, I always loved the online world. I actually wrote a lot of fan fiction. Also, before starting my own stuff, I wrote a lot of Twilight fan fiction and Harry Potter fan fiction because those are two of my favorite fandoms. And I had like a bit of a following with that.
Okay.
Yeah, it was fan fiction on MySpace, but I had a lot of people following it, and I was creating all these worlds and stories. And then I just sort of figured, I'm creating all these original story ideas in other people's worlds, but why not create my own world with my original stories and actually profit from it?
Yeah, but a good place to learn your writing.
Yeah, I think that, so my first book was actually publishable, but I think that it was only publishable because I had done so much fan fiction for years before even starting to write my first book, because my first fan fiction was terrible. Like, if that had been my first attempt at a book, I could not have published that.
Yeah, it's depressing for those who are starting out. I think Mark once said that it takes 1 million words before you find your voice properly.
Yep, I definitely wrote 1 million words of fan fiction before starting my own books.
Wow, so you're quite prolific in that sense. And you're today, but let's jump forward to today. So you're making a living out of this.
I am,
quite clear, and growing. You're still feeling it growing.
I am growing, yes. I look at this with Elementals as kind of just the beginning of my indie journey, because when I started Elementals, I'd written Elementals for traditional publishing. luckily was able to pick up with indie, but I feel like the market of readers for indie and traditional is a very different market, especially for YA. Because in YA, the traditional market is much more geared toward actual teens who are buying books in bookstores. But there's a huge YA market in indie of readers who are not necessarily teens, but just love to read YA. People like me, people like all of my friends who love YA. I mean, I get emails from people who are retired senior citizens who love reading YA and they love my stuff. So I write for them. And Elementals was definitely my start. I only planned that as a 5-book series in that world. But now I'm starting to think bigger. And I see how vampire books are doing well. Vampires, as I mentioned, have always been my favorite. I was a huge Twilight fan, so I've always wanted to write vampires. And my current series, I'm calling it the Dark World series. It's going to be multiple story arcs of 5 books within my world. And it's all going to be interconnected. And so I'm definitely thinking much bigger, and I really am going to be focusing on that in the future and trying to make that take off. I'm actually now writing a book a month. I'm not sure if I can maintain that forever, but with Elementals, I was doing a book every 2.5 to 3 months. So I'm really just amping everything up and trying to grow even more than I'm already doing.
Where and how do you write?
I write in, there's a room upstairs. So I have my bedroom, then I have like a bathroom, then I have a study area. It's just like I have a big lazy boy chair. Mm-hmm.
You're reclined, right?
I do. I recline. So I used to write on my bed because I wrote my first books in college.
Yeah.
And I actually never worked at a desk ever my whole life. Even when I was doing homework when I was like, in high school and stuff, I would just lay on my bed and work because I hate sitting at desks. I just feel super like boxed in and like I can't really move around. I kind of have like ADD a bit. So I like to lean back and recline and write. So I work on my big comfy chair.
So thank goodness you have this cool life as an indie author. You'll never have to work at a desk.
Exactly.
Yeah, one of the reasons for doing it. It's like Jerry Seinfeld said the reason he's a comedian, he doesn't like getting up early.
I don't like getting up early either.
There you go.
That's another thing I love about this. I can wake up when I'm ready to wake up.
So that's very cool. And film, TV, have they been knocking yet? Is there any interest?
Not really. So with my traditional trilogy, the Diamond one, I had a Hollywood agent, but nothing ever came from it. It just kind of fizzled. And as much as I love like watching TV and movies, like, I don't know, Hollywood's a little scary. Like, I feel like they're all sharks out there, and I'm very happy in my little book world. But if someone does come to me, like, I would definitely listen and everything, but it's not something I've really been pursuing, so I've been focusing on the writing side of the business and the book side of it.
It's such a huge and vibrant reading area, isn't it? I mean, you're a great example of there's an appetite out there for this type of fantasy. I'm a little surprised, and the success of Harry Potter and Twilight, that they aren't falling over themselves to do a little bit more fantasy based. I know there's stuff with elements, sci-fi elements and stuff going around at the moment, and but yeah, I'm a little surprised.
Well, I mean, it's out there. Like, there's Shadowhunters TV shows, but I'm not Cassandra Clare, like she's an international #1 bestselling author. Yeah, but one of the things I love about indie is that I don't have to be Cassandra Clare to make a living. Yeah, I don't have to be a Stephanie Meyer or a J.K. Rowling, which I feel like in traditional you do have to be like that to make a living, or a James Patterson or whatever. Whereas I can just be a regular selling author and make a very healthy income from that. So I love that.
We come back to that basic percentage maths, right?
I'm not a mathematician, but yeah.
We can all work out that 9% and 70%. And in terms of your current advertising then, so Facebook ads, you mentioned you're still running and still working for you. Are you advertising or working on any other platforms?
Yes, so actually I do a ton of AMS ads. I found huge success with AMS, and I do BookBub ads as well. So my main ones are Facebook lead generation ads, and Facebook ads for my books. And then the AMS ads I found have been great for my box sets, and the BookBub ads for my box set as well.
Let's talk a little bit about the BookBubs and AMS, because you hear, people are trying to get to grips with those at the moment. Yes. I'm reading a lot in the forums of people who, particularly BookBubs, in fact, both AMS and BookBubs are sort of complaining they can't get them working, and other people are weighing in saying, well, they're working for me. So,
right.
But how long did it take you to turn those into a good ROI?
Well, with the AMS ads, it was pretty quickly, actually. My first AMS ad that I did was on my Elementals box sets. And I did a bunch of testing with my ad text until I found one that worked. And then I just kept keeping the keywords running that were working and turning off the ones that weren't working. And I think that ad right now has 66% ACOS, which I'm in Kindle Unlimited, so I have to take into account that a lot of that is like Kindle Unlimited people will borrow and read. So I'm kind of happy with 100% or less with those ads. So I consider that 66% to be excellent with a KU book. So I keep that one. And I use author names for my targeting. And I just found that really worked well.
Yeah.
Yeah. And for the BookBub ads, I just sort of did what Mark does for his Facebook ads in his course. Like he has his Excel sheet and I just applied it to BookBub. The same sheet with calculating the ROI and changing the targeting. And I apply that to my BookBub ads.
Great. Well, we know that Adam Croft is doing some module for the next course. It'd be very interesting to see people do that and what sort of success they have. And Adam writes in a different genre from you as well. So he's having success with BookBub ads, as is Mark. Working well. Well, Michelle, it's really fun talking to you. And like I say, YA is such a vibrant area and big area, and it's exciting. And by the way, you're also cool people. Everyone we meet who writes YA are like the coolest people.
Oh, thank you.
So that's good. And I think people are going to be, first of all, if people are watching on YouTube, they're going to assume you've done all this by the age of 17 or 18.
Right.
Because you are blessed because you look very... much younger than you are, but you're actually a little bit older than that.
Right. I'm 30 years old.
30 years old. Yes. There you go. Secret's out. But nonetheless, you've done a lot in a short time, considering this whole world that you now occupy started in 2016.
Yeah. And there is one thing actually I think I forgot to mention is to read a lot. Like I read tons, and it's so important to know your market before you write it. And that's what I did with my vampire series. Like you just have to know what's selling in your market and kind of read a ton to analyze why. I think I read about 80 books a year, and I read all in my genre so that I can get a feel of, what books readers are enjoying and try to make sure that I'm writing books that people will want to read. I think that's so important because it's much easier to sell a book that people want to read than to sell a book that people aren't as interested in reading.
Yeah, well, that makes complete sense. And that's advice you do hear from people. Show me a good writer and I'll show you a good reader.
Yes.
You often hear. So
I think Stephen King is like one of the ones who is known for saying that.
Yeah. Well, there you go. You're living proof of it, as if we needed that. Michelle, thank you so much indeed for joining us and for hosting us in your home today. It's been really really exciting to bump into you again. We met you in Florida this time last year. We're going to look out for your ads on Facebook and follow your career, and look out for that huge Hollywood blockbuster, which is just around the corner with your name, based on a novel by.
That would be very cool.
That would be cool. Thank you. So there's Michelle. I told it would be an inspiring interview. I think she's amazing, Michelle. I think she's dedicated to her readers. She loves the genre that she writes in, which I think shines through in the way she talks about it. But she's got this kind of steely focus about her, which is, okay, I need to know how this is going to work. I need to learn it. She got your course, which she was very nice to hear her being very praiseworthy about, but she soaks up the information, implements it, and aren't we all thrilled that she's been successful with it?
Yeah, she's done really great. So it was very lovely to meet her last year. I didn't go to NIC this year, but I was there last year, and as you said earlier, she drove 2 or 3 hours from where she was down to St. Pete to meet us. And it was, I think there were 2 or 3, weren't there, who did that. Alicia Hyder was another who travelled to come down, just as not to go to the conference, but just to meet us and thank us for the course, which was, I was very flattered to get that, people doing that. It's not something that I expected. So it was lovely to see. And it's great that, 12 months later, Michelle is still doing extremely well, and has built up a really lucrative and viable long-term career for herself doing what she loves, which is kind of what we all aim to be able to do.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, she lives in Boca Raton in Florida, which is a really nice area of country clubs, golf courses, and multi-millionaires who plant their houses there. In fact, on the gated estate that Michelle lives in, were a couple of people. The guy who founded and owns, I think it was Penthouse magazine and that emporium, and also a couple of the real players from the Wolf of Wall Street film. So the ex-wife, who appears in the film as a feisty individual, and the right-hand man played by who's his friend all the way through it, struggling for names now.
Jonah Hill.
Jonah Hill, yes, played by him. So the real life version of him. And if you Google the Daily Mail, I think they did a couple of stories about this estate where they live.
No, don't do that.
No,
don't Google the Daily Mail. Honestly, James, you don't want to send traffic to the Daily Mail.
most
I'm
widely
sorry,
read
listeners.
website on the planet, isn't it? Should take some
Yes.
some
So there, James is just very interesting insight into James's psyche there. First of all, mentioning the owner of Penthouse, and then seeking naturally to the Daily Mail. So that's all you need to know.
I'll turn the camera around to my bookshelf over there.
No, don't do that.
Well, it's publishing, right?
Well, of a sort, yes.
Yes, of a sort. Yes, no, it's a really lovely area. And I think Lindsay Hall lives very nearby as well, who's somebody else who came across to see us in Nink last year. And she was there this year as well. And so you were missed this year at Nink, so you need to definitely get across there next year. It's
I'm going next year.
Good SPF thing. So you are going?
They've asked me to go next year, so I'm going to go there next year. I've got the contract, came through yesterday to speak at Denver at RWA, so I'll be in Denver next year. So at least 2 times in the States next year. We'll see, maybe a third time.
You may have you been invited to Thriller Fest as well, I think?
Oh yes, I am going to. I'm speaking at Thriller Fest, so that's 3. So there's over 3 or 4 trips to the States next year, so that's great, very exciting.
Yeah, good. But I think Nink, that particular time in Florida is becoming a bit of an SPF gathering time, and it's a really fun place to be. So look forward to that again next year.
Yeah.
Okay. So if you're interested in the course, it's selfpublishingformula.com/ads17 ADS17. We have another author interview for you next week. Somebody who's literally in the last 12 months gone from a standing start to quitting her job and living off the income, and she's writing in what most people consider a tough genre to sell online. So another really good, inspiring interview for you next week. Until then, have a great week writing and a great week selling. Bye-bye.
You've been listening to the Self-Publishing Formula podcast. Visit us at selfpublishingformula.com for more information, show notes, and links on today's topics. You can also sign up for our free video series on using Facebook ads to grow your mailing list. If you've enjoyed the show, please consider leaving us a review on iTunes. We'll see you next time.